Is your kid a celebrity, a scientist, or a magician? Are you a celebrity, scientist, or magician? I'm here with a very special guest to talk about the idea of a triple threat and how it applies to both marketing and parenting. Welcome to Market Like a Parent and Parent Like a Marketer, where we explore the connections between parenting and marketing and what one can teach us about the other. I'm Danielle Weil, founder of DW Copy, creator of Launchflow, married mom of four living on a kibbutz in Israel, and I've been helping business owners for over 20 years, made over $100 million in sales for clients over the course of my career. My guest today is Michael Roderick, the CEO of Small Pond Enterprises, which helps thoughtful givers become thought leaders by making their brands referable, their message memorable, and their ideas unforgettable. He is a former high school teacher, former Broadway producer, and he uses that background to help his clients find their innovative framework and create offers where they get paid for their brains. In other words, helps them find their secret sauce. And one of the things that he talks about is this idea of a triple threat. And that's what we're going to dive into today. So first of all, welcome.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here.
What is the triple threat concept?
Yeah, so this originally did come from the theater world and my work within the theater. And basically, the idea is that if you're a triple threat, there are three things that you do. And in the theater world, it's actor, singer, dancer. But the order of those things is incredibly important to your success. So if acting is your top talent and singing is what you do well, but it's not your top thing, and as a dancer, you can move, there are choices that you can make, right, in your career that are going to be significantly more effective for you and really help you out. And as I thought about this idea, the thing that I realized is that we all have one of those top talents. We all have our own triple threat, but I frame it as the scientist, the celebrity, and the magician. And each of those talents are very, very specific to how we think and how we approach things.
Very cool. So tell us a little bit about each one of those, who they are, what it means, and then we'll dive into the parenting bit.
Yeah. So if you are the scientist as your top talent, then you are a highly analytical thinker. You love to kind of break things down, understand things, and you tend to be okay with just research and doing the things that almost might feel boring to some other people, right? You're okay with repetition. You're okay with really sort of digging in and understanding something, but you may have a lot of challenges around doing anything kind of outside of the lab, right? Like it might be really difficult for you to be out front, to be the face of something. You'd much rather kind of dig in and sort of understand things. That's if the scientist is your top talent. If the celebrity is your top talent, and if you're more of a celebrity, you're much more relationship driven, you're much more personality driven. You usually have no problem being out in front of people, but you do have this element of you're not really that interested in the science, right? And sort of breaking things down and understanding things and getting to doing the research. You're much more into like let's hang out, let's talk, let's present, all of those types of elements. And then finally, if the magician is your top talent, you are 100% wired for novelty. You're an incredibly innovative thinker. Most of the things that you see and look at, you can kind of see different angles, different ways of doing them, but you really struggle, even if something could make you successful, with that element of repetition. If something starts to get boring, if something feels like you're doing it over and over again, you're usually going to try to find some other thing to do. So, as you can see, each of these talents has strengths that can really support you, but also weaknesses on that side. And if we, it gets really interesting when we go in the triple threat idea of what is your top talent, what's the thing in the middle, and then what's the thing on the bottom, and how does that affect how you approach your marketing. I've often referred to this as like pre-marketing, but as we were talking about, I think it's really interesting to think about how you approach your parenting and also what are your kids' sort of triple threats.
So let's dive into this with some examples, right? How
Yeah.
does this play out in parenting, and how does it show up in daily life?
Yeah. So I think that as a magician, you are so wired for novelty that you're always kind of looking for the new thing, right? Like, so anything that is repetitive feels boring to you. You're usually going to want to try to create some sort of new dynamic. So, routine may not feel nearly as interesting to you, and you're going to start to get kind of annoyed by the fact that there is routine. You're probably going to have a feeling of wanting to shake things up. Whereas if you're married to a scientist, which I am, they could do routine no problem. And your kid, if they enjoy routine, if they are also scientists, that parent is going to have like practically no problems with the kid getting them sort of through the process. But if you're a magician and you got a kid who's very, very routine, you're going to forget something and it's going to be the end of the world. Like you picked the wrong toothbrush color or food or whatever the scenario is.
Is that as you were saying this, now I think it's episode 2 where I talk about my best parenting advice, which is have a
Mm-hmm.
routine and routinely break the routine, says the
Yep,
magician.
exactly.
Right? Like, I want
Yep.
kids who can go with the flow, who can sleep anywhere, who can, because we decided to go out to dinner or spontaneously, take a road trip or whatever, does not
Yep.
bother us. And so my magician is showing a little bit, I think. And I think my husband is too, which is why we get along so well.
Yeah.
But I could definitely see if you are a stickler for routine and you've got a partner or a kid that isn't, that can potentially create some friction.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think too, it's one of those things where the way that somebody solves a problem for themselves is not always the way that we personally solve that problem. So, magicians, we tend to solve a lot of our problems with experimentation. Like, we tend to be more like, okay, I'm going to test something, I'm going to try something to figure out how to solve this problem. Whereas scientists tend to solve a lot of their problems with research, with basically being like, what is best practice? I'm going to study it and then I'm going to follow it. And celebrities tend to actually try to solve their problems just socially. Like they're basically like, okay, I'm just gonna try to get you to like me, or I mean, whatever it is, and sort of like
The
make
force
that
of my charisma.
exactly, and sort of make that dynamic. And then you see the friction, right? Because if you are more of an experimental, like you enjoy those types of things, but then somebody comes to you with a routine and they're like, follow this model works, you tend to have this dynamic of like, well, I don't really want to follow the model. I want to kind of like riff on the model. I want to play around with the model, and there can be friction, within that. And I can totally see where there can also be friction with your children if that's the dynamic.
So let's talk about business for a second.
Yeah.
So knowing what your triple threat order is, why is that important? How does it influence the decisions that you make in your marketing?
Yeah. So basically, there are things that are taught within marketing that people consider to be completely best practices, but they're best practices usually for their personality, right? And their talents and what they do really, really well. So if somebody, let's say, if celebrity is somebody's top talent, they have no problem popping open their phone and doing a quick video and showing people their food and doing all the things. And that's going to actually sell whatever their product or service is because people buy their personality. They buy that like infectious, I feel like you're my best friend kind of thing. Whereas if you're more of a magician, you may not actually really be that excited by creating video, doing video content because you're more interested in probably digging into something, creating something. If you do want to do a video, you'd want to probably do it in an interesting way because just picking up a phone and just turning on the recording feels kind of boring to you. Feels like why am I even doing this? Like what's that type of dynamic? And then if you're a scientist and that's your top talent, love getting into like the absolute sort of nitty gritty of things, and you don't ever want to be out there, right? Like you're actually not interested in that. So I find like from a marketing standpoint, you get all of these scientists who are sold a marketing technique by a celebrity who struggle like crazy to get on camera or to do whatever it is because it's going against what they do. But those exact same scientists, if they're being interviewed by a celebrity, have no problem like digging into all the specifics and all the things that all the things that they're doing because they love talking about their stuff or writing about their stuff, but they just don't love the personality, the out front element. And that's just one way to sort of think about this from a marketing angle.
And I think it really comes into play when we talk about who we follow,
Mm-hmm.
the frameworks that we follow, the tools that we buy into. Because, like you said, a celebrity can show up and just by the force of their charisma say, like, hey, you have to do this thing. And what they are teaching is a step by step reproduction of what they did. And that is going to make the scientist or the magician absolutely miserable. And
Yes.
it's kind of a little bit what I talk about with launch flow, where it's like you have to lean into your strengths.
Yes.
You
Yes.
have to make a marketing plan that plays to your strengths. And as parents, I think we also have to play to our strengths as parents and to our kids' strengths as well. And the first step
Yeah.
is awareness.
Yes. 100%. I 100% agree.
So once they have that ranking, what should they change from your perspective, both in
Yeah.
maybe when it comes to business and maybe when it comes to parenting, whatever comes to mind?
Sure, sure. I think when you have that understanding, you want to start to think about are there ways that you're executing things that are pushing against who you really are? So, from a marketing standpoint, I am always going to do better by gathering people and showing expertise, right? Because magicians, we do magic tricks and people follow us, right? Like people want to learn more about us when they see us in action, when they see us sort of going through our process or our, our thing. So a lot of the time, you know, doing the more traditional like funnel process or doing a lot of like the back and forth like hand to hand combat or following any of the sort of traditional sales methodologies, it's not going to work very well for me, right? Like it's not going to feel like it makes sense, right? And I think like if we carried over from a parenting side, it's like if you know as a parent that there are certain things that are going to make you bored, then you have to start to think about, okay, what do I do to play to this sense of adventure and sort of experimentation so that I'm not feeling basically trapped in a methodology that doesn't make sense for me, right? Like that doesn't really work. So for example, for me, if there is routine, I'm always playing around with like what are the things that spice up that routine so that I can keep doing them, right? But I don't feel just completely bored and sort of like latched into the whole thing.
Yeah. If you are bored by your daily routine and telling your kids to brush their teeth 3 times a day, you might be a magician.
Yeah. Exactly. Exactly.
So now, let's say you've got kids that are very different like this.
Yeah.
I can think of, I've got one who is 100% celebrity,
Yep.
super social, has got to be in the center of attention, takes better selfies than I have ever seen.
Yep.
She takes pictures of me like this. How did you make me look 20 years younger? Amazing.
Yeah.
And then I've got another one who's also very much needs the routine, needs the
Yep.
structure, likes knowing, what's going to happen and when, and is a little bit less of that. I think she might be a combo magician scientist like I am.
Sure. Yeah.
Is it useful to sort of start to think about where they fit into this? And does it change how you parent?
Yeah, I think so. I think, so I'll take my younger daughter, who I would argue probably celebrity at the top. I was on a call and she like gets on my lap, she like talks to everybody. She's like, very, very socially engaged. And as a result of that, requires more individual attention. And interestingly enough, she requires more structure. So just like a celebrity will often hire or work with a scientist because the scientist understands and has the structure, a lot of the time a celebrity child will need somebody to implement or sort of bring the idea of that structure into the interaction. Whereas my oldest, I would say, is very much scientist, very much structure driven, very, very logical. So as a magician, I have to kind of push against the fact that I love innovation and say she needs this every day at this time in this particular way. So there's that balance that I have to create.
It's just a good reminder that as parents, we're constantly getting information from our kids about what they need. And if you've got more than one kid, it's really about not treating them the same because they're not and they need different things.
Yeah, I think it's one of those things where that's where one of the biggest sort of challenges comes up because when we get parenting advice, it tends to be prescriptive. It tends to be say it this way, do it this way, follow this particular process. And it may work very well for one kid, but it is not going to work for another one because of exactly what we're talking about. And not only are you going to feel a disconnect in using that parenting methodology yourself based on your talent, but your kid's going to feel a disconnect with that methodology because it doesn't, jive or sort of connect with their talent.
And what's interesting about what you just said is the same thing can be said for marketing.
Mm-hmm.
The same exact thing. And I would be willing to bet that the people who write a specific parenting book with a specific philosophy that is very prescriptive is coming at it from their perspective as, whatever they are and their own experience. And if you are not that, if it doesn't work for you, you're going to feel like a failure. Follow someone's program that tells you to do XYZ and do it this and it doesn't work for you, or it feels deeply uncomfortable for you, you're going to be like, well, what did I do wrong? I must not have done this
Yeah.
wrong.
Yeah.
Or must not have done this right.
Yeah.
When
Yeah.
really it's just a mismatch.
Exactly. And I think that that's the thing in both parenting and marketing. It reminds me very much of when I worked in Broadway, there's a saying of nobody knows anything. And you'll have these instances of like you think you've got a hit. Like you've got every celebrity, who's currently on the board, you got all these things, and you're like, this thing's gonna print money, and it doesn't. And the show completely flops and you don't and like nobody buys. And then you've got something sometimes where it's like, why would anybody buy a ticket to that? And that becomes the sort of breakthrough hit. And I think the same thing happens in both marketing and parenting, where basically you're like, okay, I've heard that this thing works. This thing's going to work like gangbusters. And then you try it. It does not work like gangbusters. Thanks, so and so from TikTok or whatever.
Yup, we will not be doing that again.
Exactly. Exactly.
And so what's the answer?
Yeah, well, I think it's identifying for yourself, like where are your strengths and where are your weaknesses, and identifying for your kids, where are those strengths and where are those weaknesses, and then being able to say, okay, based on the strengths, what is going to be the best course of action for me, right? What are the things that I know are working? And then if something isn't working, paying attention to, is it just not working because of the weaknesses, right? Is it just not working because there are times where I really need to be more structured, and that's what the kid needs, and I can't just ignore that. I can't just be like, well, I don't like structure, so, everybody suffers, right? Like, I can't do that. So I honestly think that just like from a parenting standpoint, there's this whole concept of reparenting, right? Where you're basically like, I was raised a certain way. I thought this was the way I was supposed to do things. And now I grow up and I realize that was horrible, but I don't know how else to do it because everybody in my life taught me this is how you get things done. Like, this is how you solve this particular problem. And you have to have this moment as a parent where, like, you meet yourself and you're like, okay, I don't want to do what my parents did, but I don't necessarily know what to do. So I've got to experiment. I've got to try things. And I think it's just like very much with marketing, like, you've got to be open to the fact that you are going to be wrong and you're probably going to be wrong a lot of the time, right? And just be okay with that. I've written this daily email since like 2017, and the question I always get is like, how do you do that? Like, how do you write all the time? How do you stay consistent within a process like that? And I always go back to, I give myself permission to suck. I recognize like there is no way I'm going to be consistent and brilliant, that everything's going to hit, and that I have no idea what's going to work, and the market is going to tell me. Well, I think it's the same thing where I parent and my kids are going to tell me, is this effective? Is this working? My kids are my market. They're going to tell me everything I need to know, but I just have to be willing to listen. And more importantly, I have to be willing to be wrong. And that is something that's hard when we start to get set in our own ways or our own methodologies or the things that have worked for us. It's hard to periodically be like, oh, wait a second, I'm wrong. This is actually not the way to do this or approach that. And I think that flexibility is such an important point in both parenting and marketing.
I think it's hard for any of us to be wrong, but the more, paradoxically, the more you can accept that, the more you get a chance to be right.
Yes. Oh yeah. Yeah. And it's that aspect too of it's hard to do all this work to sort of create things, build things, and then have them not turn out the way that you want them to. But in every pile of wreckage, somebody picks up a piece of that broken stuff and turns it into the iPhone, right? So there's always those moments where we're like, that just completely tanked, but there's all of these like seeds of success in those moments after that thing tanked. And I think it's the same thing with parenting, where like you'll do something or you'll try something with your kid, or you'll just have a moment where like you are just being a jerk to your kid, and it
We
happens.
all have those.
Right? We all have those moments where we're like, just wow, I was probably like, I was obnoxious there, or I was mean, or whatever it is, right? And you have a choice, like in these scenarios, of you either accept that and then say, okay, what can I learn here? Or you ignore it and you have to learn it again.
It's how quickly you can accept it. I'm going to sound cliche here, but the biggest lessons can be found in our biggest failures or mistakes,
Yeah,
unfortunately.
yeah, no, exactly, exactly. And I think that as a parent and same as a marketer, you need to always pay attention to how much time you're putting into reflection, because most of the time you're going to put a lot of your time into planning and execution. You're going to spend a lot of time thinking about how I'm going to do it, and then you're going to spend a lot of time doing it. But how often do you sit down, especially after something does not go well, and say, okay, I'm going to actually think about this. I'm going to really face myself. I'm going to really have a hard conversation about why did this thing not work and what can I learn? And a lot of what we're talking about in terms of those talents, it's a great tool for that reflection to basically be like, okay, I did this thing. Was I really playing to my talent in that, or was there a mismatch of talent between me and the market? And what can I do differently in the future? How can I approach this so that it is more successful in the future?
I love that. And I think the reflection piece is so important because it's so rare and it tends to be skipped over. We tend to spend a
Yes.
lot of time planning and a lot of time doing, and then we do the thing and it's on to the next thing.
Yep.
We're constantly in
Exactly.
doing mode. And I talk about doing a launch debrief. In other words, you always have to debrief the launch, both
Yeah.
in real time and then afterwards, before you plan the next one. And
Yeah.
have those moments where you are sitting and reflecting and taking the right lessons. And sometimes you won't. Sometimes you'll come to the wrong conclusions from the data. And that
Yeah.
happens too.
Yeah, exactly. And we did this in the theater world as well. I got my master's in educational theater, and anytime you do an ethnodrama or some like presentation or something, you'd have a post-mortem. Everybody would sit down afterwards and basically be like, what did we learn here? Like, how did it go? Like, what was the response of the audience? And let's really talk about how we want to approach this in the future. Do we want to approach this in the future? Do we want to continue the path that we're on, or do we want to try different paths and try different ways of doing things? And that element of just sitting down and having that reflection is so, so key, but it's so easy to gloss over because it's emotionally hard to sit down, especially after something fails, right?
What does market like a parent and parent like a marketer mean for you?
I think it comes down to what we've been spending a lot of time tapping into here, which is be reflective. Don't let moments slip by after you've executed, after you've done things. Be reflective. Spend the time understanding again, being brave enough to have the conversations and do the reflections when you fail. I think that's what's standing out the most for me based on what we've been talking about.
I love that. And if people want to know more about you and what you do, where can they find you?
Yeah, so you can just go to smallpondenterprises.com and learn all about me. I'm on the Book of Faces, and you can find me hanging out at the LinkedIn. Sign up for the daily email. Check it out.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for being here. Thank you for a great conversation.
Of
Super
course.
interesting. And I hope that people listening learned a little bit about who they are, celebrity, scientist, magician, who their kids are, and how they can make it work for them in parenting and marketing. Thanks so much for being here.
Thanks for having me.
Until next time, I'm Danielle Weil. Let's go out there and